Hey everyone, Kristen Jaden here. Welcome to the New York State Public High School Athletic Association's Captains Club, presented by the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association. This association represents over 30,000 New York State employees and retirees from the Security Services Unit and is proud to support NYSPHSAA Captains Club. Now today our special guest, Abrahm DiMarco, will be talking to you about resiliency. Abrahm spent 21 years of his life as an officer in the U.S. Army. He's had a hand in developing leaders in a wide array of places and situations. I'm going to stop there and let Abrahm take over. Abrahm, welcome to Captains Club, and thanks so much for being with us today.
Kristen, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the invitation. Very excited to be able to talk to all the student athletes today. I would like to start with a brief introduction to myself. I just retired after 21 years in the Army. The first 14 of those years I spent in Army aviation. I was an Army aviation officer. And what that means is I got to play with helicopters at taxpayers' expense. And so if you look in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, there's a picture of my aircraft, the CH-47 Chinook. It sort of looks like a big flying bus. Then, after about 14 years of serving, I served all over the world in that capacity, in a lot of different countries, to include Iraq and Afghanistan. My career took a turn then, and I spent 3 years as a strategic planner. And as a strategic planner, what I did was whenever the general wanted something to happen, it was my job to put a bunch of smart people in the room and work on a solution, and so whatever he wanted to happen would happen. What was really cool about that job was it was in an international environment, and I was working with people from all over the world, allies from all over the world. If you look in the middle picture there on the right-hand side, is a picture of us in Afghanistan, and we had 42 different nations represented in that headquarters. So very challenging and interesting job. Then my last job in the Army sent me to Potsdam, New York, and I was in charge of the ROTC program at Clarkson University. And what my job was for the ROTC was we find high school and university students that want to become leaders. We train them and develop them into leaders, and then when they graduate from college and from our program, they go out and serve as officers in the Army. And while I was doing that job, I realized how much overlap there was between the athletic world and between what we were doing in the ROTC. And so we started a partnership with some of the sports teams, and where we would work on leadership and development and team building type activities. If you look on the bottom right, you can see a picture of some of our cadets working with the Clarkson men's hockey program. That was a team building activity we did with them. And now I do this full time. I work with businesses, athletic teams, and student groups, or anybody else on leadership development, team building, goal setting type of events. So today we're going to talk about resiliency. We're going to talk about what it means, we're going to talk about why it's important, and we're going to talk about what you can do to get for you and your team to become more resilient. First, the definition. What is resiliency? What does it mean? Well, it's the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. It's that ability to bounce back when something bad happens. If you look on the bottom of the slide, there's a series of words there that we use in place of resiliency. We say grit, or somebody has intestinal fortitude, or they have a lot of heart, or they're very tough. These are all kind of synonyms for that resiliency idea. So it's the ability to keep going in the face of adversity. It's the idea of getting knocked down and getting right back up. If you think back to when you were learning to ride a bicycle without training wheels and you fell off your bicycle and your parents would say, you got to get back up and get right on the bike and try it again. That is resiliency. That idea of getting knocked down, getting back up, dusting yourself off, and going on. So the next question is, why is resiliency important to you? Why is this important to you and your team, and why are we taking the time to talk to you about it today? the reason for this is, no matter how good your plan is, no matter how much you practice, and no matter how hard you work at something, no matter how good you are, how talented you are, something will always go wrong. We've all heard of Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will. Well, that's true. Murphy's out there, and he will do whatever he can. You're going to have people get injured. You're going to have people take bad penalties or bad calls in the game. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to make a bad decision and break a team rule. These things are going to occur, and that's okay. What matters is how you deal with it. That makes all the difference. Running around with your hair on fire doesn't help anybody. You know that if you know things are going to go wrong, because they always do, you have to be prepared for that. And the question becomes, what are you going to do to deal with these issues as they arise? What's your plan to bounce back and keep on moving forward in the face of adversity? That's what makes a difference. That's what makes a leader different. That's what makes a great leader great. There's an old saying in the Army that the first casualty in every battle is the plan. I'm going to stop for just a minute, and Kristen, can you tell me what slide you can see right now?
I can see the first casualty in every battle is a plan.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so the first casualty in every battle is the plan. And what that means is, you make all these plans, you might spend days or weeks on these, and as soon as you go into battle, that's the first thing that goes out the window. Something always happens. So I would like to talk to you quickly about an example of resilience, what this means, and what it can do for you. This is a personal example that I have, and it comes from my time when I was serving in Iraq. If you remember, I talked to you a little bit at the beginning. I was an Army aviation officer, so I dealt with helicopters. And when I was in Iraq, I spent a year there, and I was fortunate enough to be a company commander of Chinook helicopters. And our company, we had about 200 people, and we were responsible for 12 aircraft, all the maintenance that goes with that, all the pilots and the crew members, and planning all the missions, and all the refuel, and all the mechanics, and everything that went to keeping these things flying. And every night, we were required to fly 6 of the aircraft. We had missions every night for 6 aircraft. So like I said, we owned 12, and that meant we flew 6, and these are complicated machines, things, like I said, things always go wrong. You have to have a plan for that, and so we always had 2 backup aircraft that were ready to go. That way, if you had a problem with the primary aircraft, you can move to one of the backups, which meant on any given night, you could have no more than 4 aircraft broken at a time. And we had a big chart on the wall, a big maintenance chart that tracked all the different aircraft. So at any given time, the aircraft chart could look no worse than this. 6 helicopters in green, showing that those were ready to go. Those were the ones for the mission. You could have 2 in yellow status. They were the backups, and then 4 that were broken. This is as bad as it could get. Of course, you always wanted it better, but it could look this bad, and we'd still be okay. So one night, I come back from a mission, and I check in with my maintenance guys. I often did that. And I walked into the maintenance area, and there's 4 guys standing there looking at the wall, looking at our maintenance chart. And that's never a good sign when you have 4 of them looking at it at once. And so I peeked around the corner to see what they were looking at, and this is what our chart looked like. We had 1 flyable, 1 that was questionable, and 10 broken aircraft. 10. This is not good, because we were scheduled to start flying again in about 12 hours, about 10 or 12 hours. And so that meant these guys had about 10 hours to get these aircraft back up and going again. And I said to them, I said, listen, I need to go talk to the boss and tell the boss right now that we can't fly our missions tomorrow, that we're going to have too many broken aircraft. The sergeant in charge of maintenance said to me, he goes, sir, this is no big deal. My guys can handle it. Very calm, very cool. And I said, are you sure? Because if we're not going to fly these tomorrow night, I have to tell the boss now. If I tell him tomorrow, They don't have time to react, and that's a problem. And right now, like I said, right now it's probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And he says to me, go to bed, we've got this. And so I went back and I saw my boss, and as soon as he saw me, I heard about your maintenance. We're going to cancel missions. I said, sir, don't cancel them. I said, we'll be ready to go. We'll be okay. He goes, are you sure? Because he didn't believe what I was telling him. And I said, absolutely, we'll be fine. So I got up the next morning, the next afternoon, I woke up a little earlier. I went down to check on my guys. No panic, no complaining, no fussing. Just a bunch of folks out there working as hard as they could to get the job done. Nobody was stressed or unduly stressed. Nobody's running around like crazy. And when it was time to launch that night, I went back to look at the maintenance chart and looked just like this again. 6 flyable and 2 backups. It was phenomenal in performance. They had every opportunity to say, we can't do it, we quit, cancel the missions, but they knew that if we did that there's going to be units that didn't get the support they needed. And they knew what they could do, and they worked together, and they didn't lose their cool, and they were resilient enough to bounce back from that setback and be ready to go the next day. It was a phenomenal performance. And it all came from their ability to be resilient. So the question is, how can you be more resilient? What can you do for you and your team? First of all, plan ahead. The better you plan, the better you can face adversity. Now, I told you at the beginning that the first casualty in every battle is the plan. I understand that. But it's the process of going through the planning and making the plan that's important. The more you plan for something, the more you study your problem. And the more you study the problem, the better you understand it. And the better you understand it, the easier you can come up with alternatives when things go wrong. It's learning it that makes all the difference. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was in charge of all the Allied forces in the European theater during World War II, says, in preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, while planning is indispensable. In other words, going through that process, coming up with a plan, you learn so much about the problem that you're facing, that when things go wrong, then you're ready to react to it much, much sooner. Second, take a deep breath. Relax, take a deep breath. It really isn't that bad. We all have the tendency to overreact when things first happen. But running around like a hair on fire doesn't solve any problem. The rest of your team is going to take their cue from you. If you're overreacting and running around like a chicken with your head cut off, they will do the same. But if you remain calm and focused, then that's what they will do. It all hinges on you, the leader. Things probably aren't that bad. Don't overreact, and your team won't overreact. And then look for new opportunities. Something has changed. How can you take advantage of that? What can you do that will actually help your cause? Just because something's changed doesn't mean it's all bad. General Colin Powell, who's also Secretary of the State, has published 13 rules of leadership. Number 1 rule that he has is, it isn't as bad as you think. It'll look better in the morning. When he tells his story about how he's developed this over the years, he explains that it's as much of an attitude as anything else. You have to go in this with a positive attitude, knowing that whatever comes up, you can find a way to overcome it. You can find a way to be resilient, bounce back, and overcome whatever the change is. Take a deep breath and just step back. And my third thing I would recommend would be practice. Practice being resilient. Don't practice in perfect conditions. Put yourself in situations where you're cold and tired and hungry. Practice what-ifs. What if somebody's injured? What if somebody fouls out of the game? What if we take a bad penalty? That way, when it happens for real, you've been there before. When I train soldiers or when I train my cadets, my job is to put them in every situation I can think of. And that way, when it happens to them for real, it's nothing new. They can be resilient because they've already done this before. don't allow your team or yourself to get so used to a routine that every little change becomes a distraction. Practice in conditions where you're cold and tired, and then when you face that in a game, then it's nothing new. Napoleon said, "The most important qualification of a soldier is fortitude under fatigue and privation. Courage only is second. Hardship, poverty, and want are the best school for a soldier." In other words, what he was trying to say was, he wants his soldiers to go through very trying times in training. That way, when they have to do that in battle, then they've been there before and it's nothing new. It helps them to become more resilient. If you want to read a book on resiliency, I would recommend Endurance. Shackleton's Incredible Voyage is about a bunch of British explorers who go to the Antarctic, and their ship gets trapped in the ice, and it's an incredible story, what these men went through to survive that ordeal. I can't think of any story I've read that involved more resiliency than these gentlemen displayed. So to wrap all this up, resiliency is the ability to keep going in the face of adversity. Things are going to go wrong. It always happens. I've been in hundreds of operations throughout the world. Something always goes wrong. It's how you deal with it that makes all the difference. And that's up to you, the leaders, to make sure that your teams are ready for that they are resilient. And in order to do that, make sure you plan ahead, take a deep breath. It's not as bad as you think. And then to put yourself in conditions in practice so when you find them in a game situation, then there's nothing new. Finally, I work with all kinds of teams and businesses on leadership development, goal setting, values, team building, or anything else along those lines. If you think that I could be useful, I'd love to hear from you or from your team. My contact information will be on the next slide, as Kristen Jaden has all my stuff as well. I can come to your location and work with your team or any other group that you have on this type of issue. With that, thank you very much for the invitation, Kristen.
Abram, thank you so much for joining with us today. I think all those student athletes listening can really take what you said to heart about resiliency, and especially taking a deep breath and practicing, facing adversity during their practices. I think that's a great point, so I really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, make sure you contact Abram to come to your school. He has a lot of good things to talk about and that you can learn. And lastly, don't forget to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at NYSPHSAA. Also, thanks to NYSPHSAA for their support of NYSPHSAA Captains Club. And make sure you join us next time, Tuesday, March 14th at 3 p.m. to hear from a few of our NYSPHSAA Student Athlete Advisory Committee members. They're going to have a lot of things to say. They're just like you, student athletes and leaders just like you, so check it out. And last but not least, don't forget, being a leader matters and you matter. Have a great day.